إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا بعثه الله رحمة للعالمين ونصلي عليه في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى يا رب العالمين. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل كما جاء في محكم التنزيل. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. Dear brothers and sisters, we always begin with praise. Praise and gratitude, the fundamental reality of anyone who recognizes the multitude of favors and blessings that we all soak up every day from our beloved Creator, Provider, and compassionate, merciful Sustainer. So we thank Him and we're grateful the moment we wake up and throughout our day. The most biggest, most favorable blessing that we have is guidance. That we came here today, every week we will come to grow in our knowledge and understanding of faith, of the Holy Quran, in Allah's words, in the words of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, and we will grow, and we will develop, and we will have some perspective throughout our week. And at the same time, we get so many favors and blessings that most of the world doesn't have here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're all living a very good life, alhamdulillah. So in this life that we live, we realize that we're surrounded by material attractions, by selfish desires, by ego inside of ourselves. We have certain inclinations that we have. And so we are responsible for seeking guidance, for praying for Allah's help, and asking His forgiveness when we slip up. So we seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His protection from the evil from within our own selves and the evil around us. And we bear witness that there is no deity and nothing worthy of worship except for God alone, and Muhammad ibn Abdullah was His final messenger and prophet sent to mankind so that they could realize His mercy and compassion. Today we're going to continue what we talked about last week, which is we have fundamental objectives that Islamic law was sent for. So last week we talked about preserving human intellect and knowledge and growth and development through an intellectual connection with Allah and the world around us. Today we're going to talk about how we need to connect with each other, starting with the human family, right? A good, healthy society can only be formed by preserving the integrity and value of the family, starting with the husband and the wife. So the preservation of society as a whole will be easy if families are preserved, if the understanding of marriage is properly understood and preserved. So I have basically three simple principles that we learn from the Quran and the Sunnah, that if we understand these principles, our marriage can never go wrong. We can have a good, solid marriage. The number one is that this is aqdun rabbaniyun. This is a divine contract. It's not a cultural contract. It's not something we do because back home or whatever. It is between us and Allah. It is a divine contract between us and our spouse and Allah. It's a very serious, that's what it's mithaqan ghalidha. It's a very serious, of the most serious contracts that anyone could engage in. And so in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about His divine guidance to this contract. He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ بِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So he says, it's from His signs. It is from the signs of Allah that you see that there is a husband and a wife coming from two different genders that will come to live together, and it has been decreed among them that they have deep loving affection and merciful compassion, and in this are signs for those who reflect and contemplate. So if we break down this system that we see here, we see that number one, it talks about the connection of these people. Zawj, right? Zawj in Arabic means that two things became one. You have these two that are now one. And so basically, when it says لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, that you in front of Allah are coming together. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ. The believers' hearts will be brought together. Right? لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم ولكن الله ألف بينهم. So Allah can join hearts. God is the absolute authority in the universe. If you go to Him, seeking His guidance, seeking His favor, He can bring things and put them together like nothing else. Right? And so they come together. لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. The first thing we take from this, you must live with each other. You must live with each other. And that's literal. The husband who works hours on end and then never comes home and doesn't spend any time with the wife is not applying this ayah from the Quran as it was revealed. No matter how common you thought that was, no matter how many uncles and dads and people you've seen doing this, it's not Islam. Islam tells us we should live with our spouse. We should have a reasonable work schedule, and we should work with employers, with society, with family. We should make sure that we work out that we are not leaving our spouse without mu'ashara zawjiyah, without a living marriage, right? There has to be that connection where they're living together. And the second element of the word, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, is more of a spiritual concept from sakina, peace and tranquility. That you were meant to live with your spouse in peace and tranquility. Meaning what? When the husband comes home, he should be embraced with love and care by his family. The last thing he's going to expect coming in the door is angry rants of upset, this and that, about what happened when you were gone. Right? We need to feel welcomed, right? And so there should be a peace and tranquility. It should be that a husband and wife are best friends. That they feel comfortable talking to each other. They don't feel some sort of a tension. They don't feel like I can't talk about such and such with my husband or wife because of some uncomfort or tension that's there. They should always feel comfortable to talk to each other. And they should have an understanding. The Prophet ﷺ, one time, Aisha got upset with him. She says, وَرَبِّ Ibrahim. And the Prophet ﷺ smiled at her and he said, Aisha, I know when you're upset with me. And she says, how? He said, when you're happy with me, you say, وَرَبِّ Muhammad. And by the Lord of Muhammad. And when you're upset with me, you say, وَرَبِّ Ibrahim. And by the Lord of Abraham. And she smiled and she said, you're right. Now she was upset, but the Prophet immediately earned her because he understands her. He's thought about what she says and why she says it. Brothers, I can tell you firsthand, one of the biggest things that women require is you to listen and try to understand them. Right? This will make them feel so happy and comfortable. If you just talk with them and then you listen and you try to understand them in their very deep, complex feelings. It's very difficult. The male mind is thinking A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. The female mind is a vast world of deep, complex thought and emotion. We should come to understand that. And they should feel comfortable, right? There should be this وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً. He has decreed that there is deep loving affection between the husband and the wife. Meaning a type of love that nothing should come between it. It should never be that a man thinks about divorce and starts talking about divorce or threatening divorce. The only reason divorce should ever come up is after rigorous attempts at making reconciliation over very serious matters like adultery, drugs and alcohol, abuse, violence, all those type of things. When those things are there, then divorce is a subject. When it's just disagreements and this and that, it never comes up, right? The wife should love and respect her husband. She should never fear him. That mawadda, she feels a deep loving affection, right? The woman who fears her husband has a husband who does not know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or is not following him. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one time he's at home and he had his wives and they are, upset and they're raising their voice at him. And then Omar comes to the door and he hears it. He feels shy. I'm going to walk away. So the Prophet ﷺ comes to the door. Omar, what's wrong with you? He said, I didn't want to bother you. I'm just going to go ahead and mind my own business. He said, no, come on. And then his wives ran behind the curtain and hid. And Omar calls out, Ya aduwati anfusihinna. Oh, enemies of themselves. How dare you women be scared of Omar? And you don't have the respect for the Prophet ﷺ that you would not raise your voice in front of them. And they said, Omar, we fear you. We don't fear the Prophet ﷺ. The sunnah is that a woman does not fear her husband because of the lofty example of compassionate love and affection that he shows to them. That's how the Prophet ﷺ was towards his wives. Very deeply loving and affectionate. And so then the next thing is rahmah. Rahmah. This is forgive and forget. This is compromise. If you really have compassion and mercy, you have to be willing to compromise. When you research, and you should Google, the secrets of a happy marriage. So many examples of people's trial and error, as well as psychology, and all of these things are going to add to what we know from the Quran and the Sunnah, and agree with it in the example of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ, he would try to, make his wife feel very comfortable. There's so many narrations. The Prophet would do this. He would go out and milk the sheep. He would, fix his shoes. He would clean up. He would cook some things and prepare some stuff. The Prophet ﷺ in his house. He wants to make his wife feel comfortable. And so this is the sunnah, is to have rahmah. Forgive and forget. Whatever happens, let's move on. It's a married life. Bad things will happen with everyone, right? At no point do we hold grudges. I've come to find out that many sisters hold grudges against their husband. But that one time when he did, forget about it. It's over. As long as, if you've stayed married with him by your choice, then no matter what it was, you have to forgive and forget. This is rahmah. Man la yarham, la yurham. Whoever is not merciful and compassionate will not receive it. In this life or the hereafter. It's a general text. We should embrace this. So this is the example that we're told in the Holy Quran about a sound marriage. So then it says, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. In this are signs for those who think deeply. What does that mean? مُحَاسَبَةُ النَّفْسِ. لَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامِ. When Allah talked about on the Day of Judgment, we will all be called to account. He immediately swore by the one who takes account of themselves. The one that reflects and reviews what I'm doing and what I'm saying. They never become complacent. They never think, oh, alhamdulillah, I'm guided. I know my deen. I know my wife. I do everything right. Whoever thought like that has failed the path of spiritual purification, which is a perpetual, constant process until we're in the grave with the worms. Then we finish that process. So we have to review, think. These things that we're learning about the Prophet ﷺ, am I spending lots of time with my wife? Do I understand her? Am I deeply loving and affectionate? Does she feel like it's not just one day of the year that I become, oh, get the card and the flowers or whatever. Rather, these things happen periodically, regularly. Right? Am I compromising to try to make my wife or my husband feel comfortable? These are the things we have to think about. The number 2 point, after understanding the divine nature of this contract and how Allah has intended it, is for everyone to know their role. Marriage is an institution. It's not just two people living together. It's two people with huge responsibilities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed that there will be a responsibility on the man to lead his family. What does that mean? Does that mean he's the dictator? No. Nobody loves a dictator. The Prophet ﷺ did not make his wives feel like they should fear him and that he's some dictator that's going to boss them and nitpick at everything that they do and say and make them feel like they're subjugated or a slave or some sort. No. That is not the way. He leads with example. And he reserves his right and his responsibility of making a serious decision when it's a big deal, when it has an impact. He doesn't. So when the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says, كلكم راع فمسؤول عن رعيته فالرجل راع في أهل بيته ومسؤول عنه والمرأة راعية في بيت بعلها وولده وهي مسؤولة عنه. What we learn about this is that the man is responsible for the whole house. Make sure that we buy the house, we take care of it, we provide, we give clothing. But people sometimes just stop it off there. I've done those things, so now therefore no. Ra'i. You have to take care of their educational needs, spiritual needs. There's so many things. This is not just a material world. We are spiritual people. We need to make sure that our family understands the life of a devout Muslim. Praying and understanding scripture and connecting with the mosque and having halaqah and discussion at home. This is very important for us. This is very important. So it is very important that everybody understand their role. A woman is responsible for the house and for the children. If we start nitpicking about what she's doing with the house, the hadith says that's her realm. That's her house. Let her do whatever she wants to do with it. The kids, Allah created her with the womb and the breast to bear and take care of and feed children. This is something that she was created to do. She's the primary caregiver on this level. So we will go into more detail because we don't have lots of time to go into this tonight after Isha. If you would come, we'll go into great detail about rights between the husband and the wife so we can understand how to build a healthy marriage. The last principle that I would like to mention is very crucial to a healthy marriage. And that is, first there was Adam and Eve. The marriage is the fundamental, basic building block of a family. Parenthood comes after that. What does that mean? It means that birr al-walidain does not trump the rights and respect between a husband and a wife. Right? We don't say as parents when our children get married, do this, do that, you have to marry this one or you have to marry that one, this is the way, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? And be like, well, because we're the parents. That's not Islamic behavior. Why? Because Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his fatwa, المرأة إذا تزوجت كان زوجها أملك بها من أبويها وطاعة زوجها عليها أوجب. Shaykh al-Islam, he said, if a woman gets married, when he was asked about the specific issue of a woman who said, well, my parents are telling me do this and that, and my husband is telling me do this and that. So which one comes first? Bir al-walidain or ta'at al-zawj? Right? And so Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and the majority of scholars in the history of Islam have always said, this is the fundamental building block. Then they become parents. then they have that right upon their kids until they move out and get married. Then there's a new family that parents should respect as they would have hoped that was respected in building the beginning of their family. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ says, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ خَبَّبَ امْرَأَةً عَلَى زَوْجِهَا. Right? The one who turns a wife against her husband is not from among the believers, the Prophet ﷺ said. And many of the scholars, the majority of the scholars said, مِنْ كَبَائِرِ الذُّنُوبِ. For a mother-in-law or a father-in-law or anyone actually, particularly those two, to try to turn a wife against her husband or vice versa. The same is true either way at the end of the day. You don't try to destroy a marriage. You do not try to nitpick and boss a marriage. This is a very serious contract. Those two, between them and Allah, have engaged into a contract. It shouldn't be that the in-laws or the friends or the family. Marriage should be a private thing. If there is a problem, it's a private discussion. If there is some sort of dealing with that, they don't let the kids or the neighbors or the friends or the parents know about it. Unless, God forbid, there's serious oppression, violence, drugs, adultery, those things, then you don't talk to any person. You talk to the right, wise person who you know is not a gossiper at all. And that person comes and helps from each family if you like, or if you're comfortable with one that you both agree, as the Quran has told us, right? To help with the situation. You do not talk about marital problems with family or friends, ever. This destroys the vast majority of marriages. They are destroyed. One of the scholars was asked about a man, was asking, my mom and my dad are telling me this about my wife, and they live with us, and I feel like they're making me and my wife have problems. But they think that they're doing they're being my parents, and so they're telling me what to do. So what do I do about this? The Shaykh answered, those parents are doing oppression and abuse. وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْذُونَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِغَيْرِ مَكْتَسَبُوا. And he said, the hadith al-mashhur is how you give them their birr. They're asking for birr. So it says, أُنصُرْ أَخَاكَ ظَالِمًا أَوْ مَظْلُومًا. Support your brother in faith, whether they're the oppressor or the oppressed. So the companion said, why and how would we support an oppressor? He said, stop them from oppressing. So the birr here, to two parents telling the son this and that about your wife, and now there's problems between them, which is oppression, which is causing fitna, which is haram. Then to stop them from that by saying, I love you and I respect you, you're my parents. I don't mean any disrespect by this, but please stay out of our business and stop talking to me about our family, because it's creating a problem, and we have our family with our children and things that we're responsible in front of Allah before you to take care of, right? And that's how you deal with that. And then the mother and father should respect that and say, Astaghfirullah al-Azim, and then they move on. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to make us those that review everything we do and we say according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam wa rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and many of our masajid across the country have been giving khutbah since the beginning of October. I thought it would be important for me to talk about generally how do we have a happy marriage. It is a worldwide phenomenon. You have Muslims, Christians, Jews, atheists, rich, poor, black, white. Domestic violence is an unfortunate, sad reality across the world. And what it is just basically rooted in two things. Someone who has a desire to control, and they are willing to oppress to control. And someone who has a problem with anger, because they're not content with the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they don't have patience. So these two things lead to this unfortunate reality. When we study the Holy Quran, which begins, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the compassionate, merciful Allah, then we should know from the get-go there's no room for violence or abuse to anyone. except for if somebody came to attack you. Then you have to be merciful with yourself and protecting yourself from this attacker, right? Other than that, there's no way, shape, or form any believer would abuse anyone. Particularly someone who is weaker. To abuse a wife or a child is absolutely haram according to the consensus of scholars in the history of Islam. To physically harm or verbally abuse a family member, particularly one that's less than you from a power standpoint or strength standpoint, is unacceptable. It is absolutely haram. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, "La tadribu ima Allah." And he's talking about an abusive, violent type of, do not hit the female servants of Allah. And the other hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, "La yadribu ahadakum imra'atah kal-ba'ir yajdiduha fi awwal an-nahar thumma yudaji'uha fi akhirih." So, do not ever hit your wife like it's your camel that you're trying to get to move because it's being stubborn. And then in the night you want to have a sophisticated, deep relationship with her in some intimate way that now you expect that from her, right? Which you would never expect from a camel, you know. So this is the Prophet ﷺ advising us. The famous ayah in Surah An-Nisa, when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about it, he said, "Darbun ghayru mubarrah." They said, what does it mean when it says, if your wife becomes very arrogant and disrespectful and perpetually rude and things like that, and acting like she, doesn't care about this contract that you've made and your responsibility and your place in that contract, which is a very serious responsibility. Then he said, the spiritual advice, al-wa'al, and to avoid spending in the marital relations, and a type of physical reprimand that is not violent. He said, and he emphasized 3 times, ضَرْبٌ غَيْرُ مُبَرَّحٍ, a physical reprimand that is not violent. Meaning what? It's not in a fit of rage, it's not punching, it's not leaving bruises and red marks and bleeding, any of that stuff. No. In the old culture, it was seen from a woman's perspective. Back then, if the husband has told her and then finally say he poked her on her chest or slapped her on her shoulder like that and said, "Come on, I'm sick and tired of this, please stop this," she would probably have said, "Astaghfirullah, you're right, I'm out of line," and then everything is fine. فَإِنَّ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. If she comes back and she says, everything's fine, I'm sorry, I've gone too far, then always go back to the original ayah, which is وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with your wives with the highest standard of good character. Abu Bakr al-Jazairi, one of the great scholars of tafsir, he has a beautiful book, al-Tafasir. He said, this ayah has a hadaf, and it is not to be understood to be obligation or recommendation. Why? Because it is a potential solution for a problem. And it's supposed to cause a reconciliation, right? And so he's saying that if you apply this and it causes more harm than benefit, then you don't follow it, right? And we see that the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha said, radiyallahu anha, مَا ضَرَبَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم امْرَأَةً قَطْ. The Prophet ﷺ never hit any woman. Who's saying that? His most beloved wife, Aisha radiyallahu anha, who lived with him for a very long time, right? And there were many other women that he was married to during that time. She knows about all of that, right? And so somebody might say, well, the wives of the Prophet were such, mashallah, and they were, Ummahat al-Mu'mineen are beautiful examples, but they are humans, and there was one very famous example where the Prophet ﷺ was so upset and annoyed by them that he left the house and he went into the mosque for a whole month. And he even divorced Hafsa, radiallahu anha. Right? Did he hit anyone? No. But he took those measures. So if there's a problem, the brother leaves the house. The brother sleeps on the couch. Why? Because that's what the Prophet ﷺ did. You would never tell your wife to leave the room or leave the house. Right? And so we know from this that this is absolutely unacceptable behavior. And finally, this concept that the anti-Islam movement and many Muslims believe is somehow related to Islam, called honor killing. There is absolutely nothing in the history of Islamic law, according to any school of thought, that would allow any person of any family to act as a vigilante, to invent some sort of code of moral honor and then injure or kill a family member. Those type of things have been going on long before the Prophet ﷺ, and all the way as east as Japan, and all the way west as the Mayas and the Incas. Okay? This is a human sickness of a lack of respect for the rule of law. Islam has a beautiful law system. If somebody committed a crime, Islam will define what is a crime. Then there needs to be witnesses. That person will be brought in. Then the court system will look into the evidence, as the Prophet ﷺ so beautifully introduced to the world, the need for evidence until somebody's brought as a criminal. At no point should any man, woman, or anyone in a family say, we're going to do this to the family member because we think what they've done is a disgrace to our family. This is 100% unethical, immoral, haram behavior. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to have the rich example of the Holy Quran and the beautiful example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in our character, in our dealings with our families. Ya Allah, please bring goodness between our husbands and our wives. Make our wives love and respect our husbands and give them their proper credit. May Allah make us as husbands worthy of such credit and place. Make us worthy of being righteous leaders in our homes. Ya Allah, guide us with the light of the Holy Quran and the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Ya Allah, please help us to eradicate from our community domestic violence. Ya Allah, please help Muslims be those in America that help bring back the sacred sanctity of the family, that it is the healthy nucleus of a good society. Ya Allah, please help us to be those that repair what our neighbors have lost in the value of family in society. Ya Allah, please help us to be those who are the standard bearers of righteousness and goodness in the world, and we stand up for justice and compassion and good character and good thought. Ya Allah, we ask you to send your peace and blessings and mercy upon your final messenger, who was our beloved example that you sent, so that if we follow him, we will have an everlasting bliss in your presence in the hereafter. Wa aqim as-salat.